the greatest detective novel in history, Sherlock Holmes.
The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle.
When winter set in, bringing Christmas cheer along with London's frosty air, Holmes and I found ourselves drawn once more into one of those curious mysteries that only he could unravel. At the heart of this tale lay a battered old hat, a lost goose, and a jewel whose brilliance had already caused greed, theft, and bloodshed. Looking back, I cannot help but admire how, out of the smallest of clues, Holmes pieced together the chain of events that led us to the truth. It was a chilly morning, just after Christmas. I had gone to Baker Street to wish Holmes the season's greetings. When I entered his sitting room, I found him lounging in his armchair, a smile playing on his face. Before him, on a chair, lay a battered old felt hat, well worn and shapeless, as well as a plump white goose. "Merry Christmas, Holmes," I greeted him. "And to you, my dear Watson," he replied warmly. "I trust you've had a pleasant holiday with your wife?" "Indeed. But what on earth is this?" I asked, gesturing toward the unusual items. Holmes leaned forward eagerly. "This, Watson, is a most curious little problem. Peterson, the commissionaire, brought them to me last night. Allow me to explain." He then told me that Peterson had seen a scuffle near Tottenham Court Road, a man carrying a goose slung over his shoulder and this hat upon his head had been attacked by some roughs. In defending himself, the man swung his stick wildly, smashing a shop window. Alarmed by Peterson's approach, he ran off, leaving behind his goose and hat. "Peterson brought them to me," Holmes continued. "The goose we've already examined. It bears a card stating, 'For Mrs. Henry Baker,' a common enough name in London. As for the hat," Holmes's eyes twinkled, "that, Watson, is where the fun begins." I laughed. "Surely you cannot deduce much from a battered hat." "On the contrary, observe." He picked it up with delicate fingers. "It was once of good quality. Look at the band of ribbed silk. The lining, though discolored, was also expensive. The man is intellectual. See the size of the head? Yet he has fallen on hard times. The hat is cracked, tattered, and yet has not been replaced. He tries to hide his decline, but fails. Look here. The greasy rim shows he does not brush his hair, while the stains reveal his wife has ceased to care for his appearance. He has had some recent misfortune." I smiled at Holmes's precision. But before I could speak, Peterson himself arrived, breathless and holding something that glittered brightly in his hand. "The goose, sir, the goose!" Peterson exclaimed. "When my wife prepared it for roasting, she found this inside its crop." Holmes took the object. It was a jewel of such brilliance that I gasped aloud. "By heavens, Watson! Do you recognize it?" I shook my head. "The Blue Carbuncle!" Holmes cried. "The very jewel stolen from the Countess of Morcar a few days ago, with a reward of £1,000 for its return. And here it lies, hidden inside a goose." Holmes laid the jewel carefully on the table. "This," he said, "is one of the most remarkable coincidences I have ever encountered." I asked eagerly for details. Holmes explained that the carbuncle had been stolen from the Countess's hotel suite at the Cosmopolitan. A plumber named John Horner had been accused. He had been working on the gas fitting in her room when the stone vanished, but Holmes doubted his guilt. "The case against him is weak, Watson, but now this." We both looked at the goose and hat, which seemed so out of place beside such a priceless gem. Holmes rang for Peterson. "You have kept the goose's remains?" "Yes, sir." "Good, but we need more. Place an advertisement in the evening papers. Found a goose and a hat at the corner of Tottenham Court Road. Apply at 221B Baker Street to Mr. Sherlock Holmes. That will bring us our Mr. Henry Baker." That evening, as Holmes predicted, a timid man answered the advertisement. He was tall, slight, and shabbily dressed, with a worn-out look in his eyes. "You have come about the goose and the hat?" Holmes asked. "Yes, sir. They are mine. I'm very glad you found them." Holmes looked at him keenly. "May I ask, Mr. Baker, whether you had any other property in the goose? Did you leave anything in its crop?" The man stared, puzzled. "In its crop? No, sir. I should hardly think so." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. Clearly Baker knew nothing of the jewel. Holmes then handed him a fresh goose, as Peterson had already eaten the other one. Baker left gratefully, still quite unaware of the treasure that had been hidden inside his original bird. When the door closed, I turned to Holmes. "Well, that removes suspicion from him." "Precisely, Watson. Our task now is to trace where that goose came from. Mr. Baker said he'd bought it from a pub, the Alpha Inn. And so, tomorrow, we follow the trail." The next morning was crisp with frost as Holmes and I set out. We first visited the Alpha Inn, a cheerful little place near Bloomsbury. The landlord confirmed Baker had indeed bought his Christmas goose there. But the landlord did not raise geese himself. He had received them from a dealer named Breckridge at Covent Garden Market. "Now to Breckridge," Holmes said, his eyes bright with excitement. At Covent Garden, the scene was bustling. Barrows loaded with vegetables, stalls piled with fruits, crates of poultry, porters shouting, carts rattling over the cobblestones. Holmes went straight to Breckridge, a surly fellow with a sharp tongue. He asked about the geese he had supplied to the Alpha Inn, but Breckridge, annoyed at constant questioning, refused to answer. "Enough of your meddling. Be off with you." Holmes tried another tact, but the dealer grew only more hostile. At that moment, however, a man rushed up to Breckridge, breathless and anxious. "For heaven's sake, Mr. Breckridge, tell me, have you sold the geese? Who bought them?" "Why should I tell you?" snapped the dealer. "I've had enough of this goose business." Holmes seized the opportunity. "I think we can help this gentleman, Watson. Perhaps if we step aside, he will tell us what troubles him." The man was a small fellow, nervous and shifty-eyed. "My name is James Ryder. I must know what became of those geese. They were mine, or rather, I had some interest in them." Holmes's expression sharpened. "Ah, Mr. Ryder, then perhaps you will accompany us back to Baker Street." Back in our sitting room, Holmes turned suddenly on Ryder. "Now, sir, we shall have the truth. You are after the Blue Carbuncle, are you not?" Ryder collapsed into a chair, his face white as chalk. "How do you know that?" "Because the stone was found inside the crop of one of your geese," Holmes replied coolly. Then, under Holmes's quiet but relentless questioning, Ryder confessed. He was the head attendant at the hotel where the Countess Morcar lodged. Knowing the value of the carbuncle, he conspired to steal it. He placed the blame on the innocent plumber Hormer, who had been working in the room when the stone vanished. But to hide the jewel, Ryder stuffed it down the throat of a goose he had obtained from his sister's small poultry farm. But in the confusion, he lost track of which goose held the gem. By the time he discovered his mistake, the birds had been delivered to Breckridge's stall and sold. Ryder had been frantically trying to trace them ever since. He wept, trembling. "For God's sake, Mr. Holmes, don't hand me over to the police. It would break my poor mother's heart. I never meant to harm anyone." Holmes regarded him coldly for a long moment. Then he sighed. "I am not a policeman, Ryder. The stone shall be returned to the Countess. You, however, must live with the fear and disgrace of what you nearly brought upon yourself. Go, and never cross my path again." Ryder stumbled out into the night, broken and terrified. I looked at Holmes in astonishment. "Surely you might have brought him to justice." Holmes smiled faintly. "Christmas, Watson, the season of forgiveness. Besides, the law will punish him far more cruelly than I could. His own conscience will be his jailer." I could not argue, and as I looked once more at the glittering carbuncle lying safely on the table, I felt only admiration for my friend's skill in unraveling such a strange chain of events, all from the simple clue of a man's battered old hat.